Shalom, welcome to the Jewish Task Force, J.T.F. I'm Chaim Ben Pesach, and we have another show with the great David Ben Moshe. This is going to be a really important show because we're going to discuss how the European Nazi countries are now openly recognizing an independent Palestinian terrorist state, unilaterally recognizing this independent Palestinian terrorist state, which would be national suicide for Israel. That would be the end of Israel. So the world pressure on Israel to commit suicide is growing. The importance of the Hilltop Youth saving Israel is important now more than ever. Ireland, Spain, Norway have all recognized a Palestinian terrorist state now. Very, very dangerous for Israel. And Joe Biden, the late Joe Biden, and President Anthony Blinken have both threatened also to recognize this so-called Palestinian terrorist state. So we're in a lot of trouble here. There's a lot of danger ahead. And the only answer is what J.T.F. is offering with the Hilltop Youth. That's our only chance to stop it. We're going to discuss all the implications and everything going on. This is a really important program. And of course, David Ben Moshe always has important things to speak about as well. But first, this program is dedicated to Refuah Shlema, complete recovery for Sharon Mitman, Yitzchak Ben Sarah, Ruven Ben Shoshana, Shlomo Ben Sarah, Dorit Bat Sarah, and Ruth Bat Sarah. And to Ilui Neshamot, elevating of the souls for Malka Bat Meir, Allegra Bat Shlomo, Daniel Nankin, Victor Chazdai, Pesach Zeh Ben Dov, Lunita Adler, Shifra Hoffman, Ruben Hoffman, Barry Hoffman, Harab Mir Kahana, Harab Benjamin Kahana, Tzipora Fegi Bat Liba, Yosef Ben Meir, Robert Mittman, Dennis Shore, Helen Friedman, and Charles Zolat. Well, this was a day in which, well, the day we're doing this show, 3 European countries now have recognized this independent Palestinian terrorist state, which is a call for Israel's destruction. Israel cannot survive in boundaries that are only 6 to 9 miles wide. If there's a so-called Palestinian terrorist state, Israel will be 6 to 9 miles wide. They have 57 Muslim countries. The Muslims have 3,000 times as much land as the Jews. Just the Arab countries, the Arab Muslim countries, because they're Arab Muslims and they're non-Arab Muslims. Just the Arab Muslim countries, there are 22 Arab Muslim countries, have more than 600 times the land that Israel has now. And if you count all the Muslim world, it's 3,000 times as much land the Muslims have as the Jews. And they're demanding that the Jews give up this pipsqueak tiny little territory that they have, surrender their biblical heartland and go back and go to boundaries that are 6 to 9 miles wide. That'd be absolute suicide. The absolute end for the Jewish people it would lead to another Holocaust, God forbid. And again, the only forces on the ground that are fighting against this in a practical way are the Hilltop Youth, those Jewish heroes who have created dozens of hilltop communities on strategic hilltops, and they are literally right in the middle of where the Arabs want to create a Palestinian terrorist state. They've taken the hilltops that are right in the middle that prevent contiguous Arab population. In other words, they split up the areas where the Arabs would want to create a state. They're right in the middle, they're like putting a knife in the throat of a so-called Palestinian terrorist state, having those hilltop communities there. And so even today, what do the Europeans demand? That remove the hilltop communities, of course. That's, of course, the demand that comes up immediately. Now, the late Joe Biden and President Anthony Blinken have both said that the United States will unilaterally recognize an independent Palestinian terrorist state. They have both threatened to do this, and you can be sure, maybe they'll wait till after the war, or maybe they'll wait till after the election, but you can be sure they'll carry out that threat. All these European countries are paving the way, and once the United States does it, the whole world, by the 146 countries in the UN voted to unilaterally recognize an independent Palestinian terrorist state. 146 countries, that's the vast majority of countries in the world. The vast majority of the world already is recognizing them. And there is no Palestinian people, and there is no Palestine. It's all a gigantic Nazi big lie. There's never been a Palestine or a Palestinian people at any time in history. Never. Name one Palestinian poet of 100 years, or Palestinian writers, or Palestinian artists in the 18th or 17th or 16th centuries? Name one. There has never been a people like this. The Arabs themselves always said there's no such thing as a Palestinian people 60 years ago. They always said, don't call us Palestinians, we're Arabs. This is the biggest fraud and lie ever. And no one is telling the truth about this. All the so-called Jewish organizations, none of them are supporting the Hilltop Youth except for this organization, J.T.F, the one that you're watching right now. We're the only one in the world that is giving money and support to the Hilltop Youth. The only one in the world. And so with tiny Israel, if the United States joins in under the late Joe Biden and President Anthony Blinken, if they join in and recognize this terrorist state, that means the whole world will all gang up on little Israel, on tiny Israel, and Israel with her traitor leaders. You know that means that, believe me, these traitor leaders will accept this state and will accept the suicidal plan. They will accept it. Netanyahu already made a speech at Bar Ilan, and he's made other speeches where he has said that he believes in the two-state solution. Now, because of October 7th, he's backed away from that temporarily. But you can't trust him for 1 second. And he's already saying, we don't want control over Gaza. We don't want control over the civilian lives of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria. And he's calling them Palestinians, by the way. All the leaders are calling, even though they know there's no such thing as a Palestinian people. Even the left in Israel always said there's no such thing as a Palestinian people. David Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, and then even phony right leaders like Menachem Begin always said there's no such thing as a Palestinian people. Menachem Begin writes about how there is no Palestinian people in his book, Mered, The Revolt, his famous book. He explains how there's no such thing as a Palestinian people. And then as prime minister, he recognizes the Palestinian people at the Camp David talks. This is just beyond belief. What a joke we have as leaders. What a joke. If it wasn't for the Hilltop Youth and J.T.F., if it wasn't for the Hilltop Youth and J.T.F., the Arabs would have taken over Judea and Samaria by now. That's for sure. They would have taken over with their massive illegal building, everything. They built over 80,000 illegal structures. Right, only in Section C, which is supposed to be the Israeli section, under the Camp David, under the Oslo Accords, the obscene, cursed Oslo Accords. They've already taken over a third of the area that was allotted to Israel by illegal massive building, over 80,000 homes and buildings that they built there. And if the Hilltop Youth weren't there, they would take over everything. Everything. And so
the Arabs want a two-state solution. I mean, they can talk, but deep down, do they want their own state?
Of course they do. Of course they do. Of course they do. They will eventually accept it. Sure they do. They're going to accept it on their terms, though. It's going to be unilateral. It's all going to be on their terms. But they know that this would lead to the end of Israel. And so this is the situation that we're in. Now, we do have Arabs who are dumb enough to say, no, we only want one state. We want to destroy the Jewish state. We don't want... But they know that the Jewish state won't last long if you have a so-called Palestinian state created there. They know it won't last. And the thing that held up things when they had negotiations is because the Arabs demanded that millions of Arabs who they claim lived in Israel prior to the 1948 war when Israel was created. They claim that millions of Arabs lived there and were driven from their homes. And they want millions of Arabs to be allowed to flood into Israel now, which will, of course, lead to an immediate Arab majority and the immediate end of Israel, the immediate demise of Israel. That's what they demanded in the talks, in the negotiations. That's why the negotiations didn't succeed. But they don't even need that. They don't need negotiations. They don't need anything. They're going to take over physically. If the Hilltop Youth are not there, they will physically take over on the ground, and that's it. And the Jews could do anything they want. They're going to have no power to stop it. I mean, that's where we are. That will happen. That's their plan, and that will happen, and the whole world will recognize it. And so will Israel's pathetic leaders. It was Israel's leaders who funded the Hamas terrorists. Israel's leaders gave them billions of dollars. And now they talk about we have to eliminate Hamas. Who created Hamas? Israel's leaders funded them, the traitor leaders of Israel. And AIPAC, which is supposed to be the Jewish lobby, they're the ones that push. They openly say, right away, the first thing they say, as far as their principles, is that they support the so-called two-state solution, which means the destruction of Israel. That's what AIPAC openly says. And you have self-hating Jewish traitors with kippot, with yarmulkes, who go and are part of AIPAC. You are destroying Israel when you join AIPAC. This is the organization you should be participating in and supporting. If you really love Israel, if you're not full of crap. So that's where we stand right now. Now, the Hilltop Youth are expanding. They're expanding their communities, but there's going to be a massive push on those communities to destroy those communities and take them away. Because the whole world is now ganging up on little Israel to do this. The whole world. So there's going to be a massive push to get Israel to take this suicidal step. It would be absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. And again, if you don't have facts on the ground, I don't care what your declarations are. I don't care what you say in press releases. All the Jewish organizations issue press releases. By the way, press releases are awful, are terrible, are harmful to Israel. In their press releases, they say, we're against Palestinian terrorism, but we want moderate Palestinians. If you believe there are Palestinians, number one, that's the end of Israel. If you're going to recognize Palestinians. And all the Jewish organizations recognize that, including the so-called Orthodox. And if you believe there are moderates, which there are not, Islam doesn't allow moderation. There are no moderates. If you believe there are moderates, you're going to that's the end of Israel. That's the demise of Israel. Because I'm going to say, oh, they're moderates? Okay, let's give the land to the moderates. All the things they're doing will lead to the demise of Israel, God forbid. Complete insanity. And remember, we have been right from the start. We warned that the Jews would get massacred. We warned that what happened on October 7th was going to happen. We've been warning for decades about this. Everything that has happened, we've warned about. Remember what our beloved Rabbi, Meir Kahana, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kadosh Livracha, Hashem Yikom Damo, said. If you don't pick Kahana, you're going to get Arafat. And everybody mocked him. Everybody mocked him. Even some of his own supporters said, why are you saying this, Rabbi? Nobody's going to accept Arafat. That's like saying that the United States would accept bin Laden after 9/11. There's no way. But surely enough, after Rabbi Kahana said, 5 years after he said it, we had the Oslo Accords, and they brought Arafat to the land of Israel with 80,000 armed PLO Nazi terrorists who went on to massacre thousands of Jews. I mean, this is beyond insane. Beyond insane. And the European Nazis now, who are recognizing, European Nazis who for 2,000 years have slaughtered and tortured and raped the Jewish people. For 2,000 years of pogroms and inquisitions and crusades. You know what they did in the crusades? The Catholic Church is very pro-life, right? They were very pro-life. The Crusaders were ordered to do what they did by the Catholic Church, by the Pope. They went to Jewish communities. They took pregnant Jewish women and took their swords out and cut the babies out of their stomachs. That's what they did in the Crusades. In the first crusade, they murdered 80,000 Jewish men, women, children, and babies. 80,000 they murdered. Why? Because they're Jews. For 2,000 years, the Europeans have hated the Jews and wanted to wipe the Jews off the face of the earth. And people say, well, that was then. No, that was then. Look now, they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. They want the Arabs to do the dirty work and carry out the Holocaust. They know that if the Arabs overrun Israel, if there's a Palestinian terrorist state and the whole Arab world turns on Israel and they overrun Israel, overrun little Israel, they know that's going to lead to a Holocaust and they can't wait. They salivate over the thought of a Holocaust, of another Holocaust. They want the Jews wiped out. And the European Court in The Hague has issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu. They want to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes. Benjamin Netanyahu. They don't arrest for war crimes. I mean, someone who doesn't even defend his own people. He's facing war crime trial. I mean, what an unbelievable, and let me tell you something. Those of you who continue to support Netanyahu are hopeless. Hopeless. After everything he's done, after his catastrophic leadership for so many years, catastrophic. How can you support this monster?
You know how many times Jews were attacked and killed? In small attacks, maybe one person, two people, and he did absolutely nothing.
Over 600 Jewish soldiers have been murdered in this war. This war where Israel is doing nothing. Israel goes in and then moves out and lets the Hamas terrorists come back in again. That's the war in Gaza. That's what's going on there. Just today, as we're doing the show, another 3 Jewish heroes in the Israeli army were murdered in that war. And if you saw the pictures of the female Jewish soldiers who were the ones watching when the Hamas terrorists came and they were taken prisoner and hostage, they released some of the pictures today. Whole faces bloodied and just unbelievable what happened to these women. These monsters. And that's whom the world is demanding that Israel hand everything over to. In other words, what Hamas did to the Jews, massacring the Jews, look at the big reward they're going to get. Now the whole world is urgently demanding that Israel commit suicide because of that. That's the response of the world to this massacre. It's really, it's just, and the thing that's amazing about this, that really amazes me about this in this generation where nobody stands for the truth, except for very few people stand for the truth in this generation. The Hilltop Youth stand for the truth. Very few people, though, among the leaders and organizations, none of them will stand. They don't want to stand behind the Hilltop Youth. Now, major rabbis in Israel have said that we should support the Hilltop Youth. Okay. They've issued statements, by the way. Big leading rabbis, especially in the religious nationalist camp, have said that we should support the Hilltop Youth. Are they raising money for them? No. But they've issued statements saying we should support them. These rabbis, by the way, raise many millions of dollars for the yeshivas, for other things. I think they should be raising money for the Hilltop Youth. And they themselves have said it so that it's essential. And it's left to an organization like J.T.F. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. In many of these hilltop communities, 50% of their budget comes from Chaim ben Pesach. Not J.T.F. Chaim ben Pesach, me. I worked my whole life. I'm giving them everything I have. Comes from me in many of these communities, in many of these hilltop communities. But if I didn't do it, and if other people weren't doing it, where would we be now? What would happen? What would happen to the Jewish people? Everybody will be asked someday, what did you do when you knew that this situation existed? Everybody's going to be asked on Yom Hadin, on the Day of Judgment. Everybody. Question is, what will the answer be? Now, I'm going to give you a chance to do the right thing. I'm going to give you a chance to support these heroes. There are Jews who give money to the UJA, the United Jihad Appeal, which is an evil organization that supports every traitorous cause under the sun, that give to Hadassah, another evil organization that runs hospitals that train Arab terrorist doctors who support Hamas. And by the way, literally posting things on the internet supporting Hamas and their doctors in Hadassah Hospital. That's where your money's going. Their big thing is we must train a lot of Arabs and not enough Arab doctors, not enough Arab nurses. We are same like over here, what they do with affirmative action here. That's where your money goes with Hadassah. You know how many Jews I met? I remember years ago, I would meet all these elderly Jews, and this is 30, 40 years ago, who would they'd be part of Hadassah's $1 million club. They gave $1 million to Hadassah. So they're part of the $1 million club. Imagine if they gave $1 million to J.T.F. Or Adelson, who gives hundreds of millions of dollars to crazy causes, to terrible causes, and supports Netanyahu. Adelson is gone now. His wife, his widow, continues his crazy behavior. Adelson, by the way, is the richest Jew in the world. And then you have, of course, the majority of American Jewry. Majority of American Jewry are self-hating, assimilated, leftist scum. Bernie Sanders said he agrees with the Hague issuing an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. Oh, I agree. I agree. This is something that we should be doing after all. After all, it's terrible. It's a massacre of the Palestinians. We don't want a massacre of the Palestinians. That filthy pig. That beast. That communist beast. Cowardly communist beast.
With 4 houses.
He's a communist with 4 houses. Yeah, well. Anyway, here's what you can do if you have any sense of justice or a Jewish conscience, or righteous Gentiles that have a righteous Gentile conscience. Here's what you can do and what you should do. To support the heroic Hilltop Youth, you go to our Hebrew main page, hayamin.org, and you click on the donate button. That's all. It's the page is in Hebrew, but there's a donate button in English on top. Very easy. You just click on the donate button. In several minutes, you can easily and conveniently donate online. That's online. If you want to donate through the regular mail, if you don't want to donate online, you can make checks and money orders out to J.T.F. and you send it to J.T.F. P.O. Box 650327, Fresh Meadows, New York 11365. There are some real heroes, real Jewish heroes in our generation. Incredible, magnificent heroes. You can be supporting those heroes and be on the right side of history. Or you could be apathetic and not do anything. That's up to you. The choice is yours. One thing J.T.F. does do, we give you a choice. We give you an opportunity to do something truly great with your life. David?
Well, I'm going to mostly talk about America, which is another problem country. Why is it if Chaim or myself or someone else who's been living here their entire lives wants to go to Europe, why do we need a passport? Well, you need a passport to get into Europe. I don't know why, because they've taken in so many what's called refugees, but they're just terrorists in hiding. Some of them are not hiding. Why do we need a passport to get back into this country when people from Latin America could just walk across the border and come in here? Why do we have to follow rules set up just for us? I thought that under the law, we're all supposed to be equal. Why do we need a passport to get back in? They should just open the gates. If you've traveled to Europe and you come home, just walk back into the country. You have people from the third world who just come in by the tens of thousands, and they're bringing this country down. Some of them, I doubt, but I heard some of them may be actual professionals who just want to come here, and they don't want to wait. They don't want to come in the valid way. So they're coming in, which is depleting the countries they're coming from of manpower resources of the few people that do have brains. But look at all the others coming in that can't contribute a thing. All they can do is take, and commit crimes. Whatever New York City did for them, they're claiming it's not enough. Where do they get the nerve with free hotels, free food, free clothing to say it's not enough? They want this country. But can you imagine what this country would look like after a year with them in charge? You can see what our cities look like with them in charge. And look what the left has done to the Boy Scouts. Once a very viable organization, you had the Cub Scouts, then the Boy Scouts, and the Eagle Scouts. On the girls' side, you had the Brownies and then the Girl Scouts. The Brownies were for the very young. And they did worthwhile things. They taught, they supplemented what you learned in school, useful everyday things for life that you weren't taught in school. And then the left got a hold of it. They started bringing in gay scoutmasters. They okayed gay scoutmasters. And then that wasn't enough. The Girl Scouts wanted to be part of the Boy Scouts because the Boy Scouts are discriminatory. They don't allow girls. That's why it's called the Boy Scouts. Today, I don't even know, do the Boy Scouts still exist, or is that a bankrupt organization? I don't know, but you don't see Boy Scouts anywhere. When I was a kid, you'd see some come in their Cub Scout uniforms or their Boy Scout uniforms, or there was an alternate group, I guess sponsored by the U.S. Navy, called the Sea Rangers, and they'd come in dressed like little sailors. And they learned valuable everyday lessons of life that's not taught in school, not when I went, not taught now, nothing's taught now. But when I went, you learned book learning, how to read, write, do arithmetic, how to do a useless mathematics that you're never going to use in life. But that, and history, and every year you learned American Revolution, American history. And each year it was, once again, American history, a little more detailed because you're a little older, your brain could absorb more. And that's how it was. Today they teach nothing. And I know there's no Sea Rangers, there's no Campfire Girls anymore. And I'm not so sure there's a Boy Scouts anymore. But if it is, if they're hanging on by their fingernails, they're a shell of what they once were. Now, 2 weeks ago, Ashadine and I went down to Phoenix, actually Scottsdale, but it's the same roads. Construction everywhere. One of the construction sites on Route 17, Interstate 17, is major. They're literally moving mountains to expand a 2-lane highway into 3 because the traffic is so heavy coming down into Phoenix. So 3 lanes, and the 2 lanes were right up against the edge. You look down, you saw them, the big drop away. So they're building mountains. So it's endless construction. Imagine if this was New York, this would go on for 25 years. You finally get down and you want to take Route 101, which is a state route. Let me see, east is to the left, west is to the right. You see, go east, go about 2 miles, major construction again. Up here where I live, construction on every secondary and major road here. They don't even leave you an alternate path. How many times I said to Ashadina, I think we're back in New York, because in New York they don't leave you an alternate path. Every road is under construction, and nothing ever gets any better, because even after all the years of work where traffic is tied up endlessly, and now it looks brand new and it looks great, so the construction crews moved down the road a few miles. So now you can travel where it was all tied up, but you just go a few miles and they're starting new construction for more years. This never happened before. This is how you tell you have a Democrat in the governor's house, because it's endless construction as you get close to her re-election. So that all the construction workers will vote for her. I would say union workers, but this is a right to work state. So a lot of these workers are not union members, and you actually see a few doing some work. So It gets done faster than New York, but still, like that project where they're moving mountains on Route 17, actually Interstate 17, that's at least a 5-year project. Was it needed? Yes, because in New York, when there's an accident, they push the bodies and the cars off to the side to get the traffic moving. In Arizona, your road is closed about 7 hours, no exaggeration, because they take pictures from every angle to figure out how did this accident happen. Once coming back from singing down in the Phoenix area, we got stuck in that. We were coming down the other way, and we saw the accident, and the traffic was backed up for miles. I figured by the time we sing, and if we go out to eat, because we don't want to come right back and drive into that, by the time we come back, it'll be wide open. No such luck. Sitting in traffic, moving by inches, we finally get off to this place and go in and have a second supper. And when we come out, the traffic is still sitting there. But about 20 minutes later, it finally opened up. 7 hours and about 15 minutes of road closure. And this happens all over Arizona when there's an accident. Meanwhile, leftists are now claiming math and English are not fair to black people. The courses in it, math and English. The Wheel of Fortune is not fair to black people. I didn't know the Wheel of Fortune goes by skin color. You either, in the preliminaries, you answer some questions. If you get the answers, there's a good chance you'll be on the show. If you don't do well, you won't be on the show. Math and English is something everybody should know to speak correctly. But they're going by skin color. What happened to Martin Luther King's where we could judge a person by their character and not their skin color? Well, all today's leftists doing, and they've convinced conservatives to do it too, is judged by skin color. If you remember George Bush Sr., who was not a conservative, he was, I don't know what he was, but he said there'll be no quotas under him. Of course, he did quotas, but he didn't call them quotas because he said there'd be no quotas. And that's the Republican. And I just wanted to say that the difference between animals and humans, animals would never elect the dumbest amongst them to run the herd or the pack. Humans do. I don't know who this guy is. I heard the name. Maybe Chaim, he's a little younger. Maybe he heard him. Eric Clapton, a singer. Actually, to me, he's a noisemaker. His guitar has the Palestinian flag on it.
Should drop dead.
Over in Italy, a few years ago, they elected this right-wing woman who hasn't done a right-wing thing since she's been in office. And the third world is starting to take over Italy. There's violence in every major city. It's just like here in America. And the violence is coming from these third worlders, many of them Muslims from the Muslim world. An Italian woman starts screaming at this third worlder who's cooking a cat on the streets. And the third world is telling the Italians it's their fault that they're like this. And they said the Italians should be more welcoming. Allowing these cretins to come into your country by the millions is mighty welcoming. In fact, it's past welcoming. It's in the realm of insanity. And it's not really a story, but if you remember in the movie Patton, General Montgomery, who was in command of all the ground forces, American and English and Canadian, was supposed to take Caen, the city of Caen in France, on D-Day. He didn't remember. If you remember in the movie, Patton said, "I knew he couldn't take it on D-Day. I knew he couldn't take it on D-Day plus 10." It actually took 2 months. But what happened in those 2 months? Artillery shelling, bombings from strategic and tactical air forces, fighters carrying rockets and bombs. Khan was nothing but rubble, just bricks and stones, which gave the Germans more cover than being in buildings. But what I wanted to say is, you look at that city today, and then you look at our cities, and we're the country that won the war. We're the country that rebuilt Europe, and we didn't go into debt. We had budget surpluses at that time. Even as late as the late 40s, we had surpluses with the Marshall Plan, building up Europe, building up in the Far East. The Philippine city of Manila was like Khan, rubble. Today, it's a major modern city. You look at the Japanese cities that were bombed, firebombed. Tokyo, in one night, it was the most destructive night of the war. We killed 120,000 firebombing Tokyo. Look at Tokyo today. Then look at Detroit. Look at Los Angeles. Look at Philadelphia with people bent over, standing up, bent over with their arms just hanging, and they don't move like statues. They're so drugged out. I'm assuming that's what's happening there. I don't know. There's homeless people, but a lot of them are just standing bent over with their arms just straight down to the ground. This is the country that won the war. This is the country that defeated communism and then became communist ourselves. This is amazing, but this is what happens when you bring the third world into your country. You bring the third world in, you become the third world. First of all, they can't compete with first worlders, so they're always going to be an anchor around your neck. And second of all, they bring their third world culture with them, the violence and the filth and the garbage, and like the man cooking the cat in the street to eat. They bring that with them. And then they want benefits because they can't compete. So you become the third world. You can't bring them up to our level, but they can quickly drag us down to their level. And with the state of this country, with the debt, was it 34 trillion now, quickly approaching 35 trillion? With the crime all over, the decay in the cities. It's not even decay, it's rot. And the many places in the cities smell awful. They look awful. We have airplanes that are not being held together because we have third worlders maintaining them. And now they want to make third worlders pilots, whether they're qualified or not, because of their culture and skin color. Would you want to be the next president and step into this? How do you even fix this? I think it would take a strong leader, a lot stronger than Donald Trump, to get to work on this and just ignore Congress. Congress is useless. They're there to serve themselves and enrich themselves. They are the most useless body in any country's government, and they're getting more useless every day. All they do is investigate each other and hold meetings and enrich themselves. How can a body of 535 people on a salary of 175,000 a year, how is it that every last one of them is worth multi-millions? Once again, I'll tell you, Harry Truman said the only way you could get rich in politics is if you're a crook. That lets you know what our Congress is. So I don't know if anybody wants to really be president, because I don't think you're going to come out without being very bruised. I am.
Well, certainly all true. Certainly all true. In your heart, you know we're right. And in your guts, you know they're nuts. You know the message we bring you is an important message every week that nobody else is going to bring you. Nobody else is going to say these things to you. So you should be promoting us all over the place, all over the internet, and spreading the word. And of course, helping the heroic Hilltop youth. For J.T.F. until next week, this is Chaim Ben Pesach, and for David Ben Moshe, Shalom.